We're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you had a nice lunch or lunch break. Today we're going to talk about rural and suburban infrastructure for clean mobility options. We're not going to have presentations. We're just going to have an overall general conversation that's going to be led by some questions that I'm going to pose just to get it started. But I feel like when we're talking about this topic, especially at this time of the afternoon, it's great to be able to have kind of just an organic discussion. I have the pleasure, my name is Dr. Cassandra Little. I'm the CEO of Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce and Chamber Foundation. I always start off by saying that I love my job for several reasons, but I really love that I can say Black as much as I want to in all spaces. Because oftentimes that's a challenging conversation to have. So I always like to start off by saying that. Our agency also participate in, we have a couple of mobility option projects, so this is really near and dear to me. I love the work that we're doing in communities, so when I was asked to lead this presentation, I jumped at it, the opportunity. Today we kind of have a chance to talk about planning and community engagement, and for me, I believe in intersectionality, how all of those kind of blend, and when we're talking about working with communities, planning, which people see as at the beginning, and then you have community engagement, which I say should be at the beginning, all intersect. So I'm glad that these topics are intermingled today. Today, I'm not going to go over their bios. We have a short period of time, and I know the one person next to me in red, she talks a lot, so I'm going to leave time for that. And I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves and what they do on their own. And I'm going to start this off by asking each of our panel members to kind of take a deeper dive into the topic and discuss why is it important for us to center the issues of engaging rural and suburban communities when we're talking about infrastructure, any kind of infrastructure change, but particularly with clean mobility options.
You go first. Okay, the mic's on. Well, hi everyone. I'm Kim Sollien. I am from. You're so helpful, Keshia. Thank you. I'm from Alaska. I live in Palmer, which is about 50 miles north of Anchorage. I am 3 years on the job as the planning services manager, and so I had a long career in the nonprofit world doing land conservation and social work. And so I definitely come to government planning with different eyes. And so I don't know how we're supposed to do it all the time because I came from the nonprofit world. So I get in myself in lots of interesting conversations based on asking why do we do it that way and why do we need to change. I have some stories to tell, but I think I'll just stop there. I'll say two things about the culture of my organization. We are a very conservative community. We're about the size, our region is the size of West Virginia. We have 3 incorporated cities, but for the most part, we're a very rural community that's urbanizing in the core area, so the roaded area between those 3 cities. I work for a government that's anti-government and not interested in providing any services to the community, but I come to work with a value system that, no, actually the point of government is to help provide the services for the community that no individual could provide for themselves. And so I think I'll stop there and
Thank you.
Curtis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Curtis Witek. I'm a Director of Planning for a company called Antero Group. We're an urban planning and civil engineering firm based here in Chicago, but we also have an office in Denver and Denton, Texas, in North Texas. And I work on kind of my portfolio of work spans cities, suburbs, and rural areas. And I think today I'm excited to pull on some case studies here from some projects in the south suburbs of Chicago, and more recent or most locally a project in Bedford Park where we worked with Uber, Via, and Move It to do a last mile and late night mobility pilot program. And there's some lessons learned from that I'm excited to hopefully be able to expand into the Southland region, which is another name for Chicago's south suburbs. very excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, I got on the microphone. I have to talk big like a teacher all the time. So, my name is Keshia Thomas, and I am the Executive Director for Fresno Career Development Institute. And this means a lot to me. The community that I work for, I grew up in, which were the projects. The community that I work for, I went to school in. The community that I work for, I am an elected official in. So I'm a school board member there. And the community that I work for, I still live in. And so while I know all of the deficits that my community has faced from the time I was a little girl, and now I'm almost 50, which is amazing. I love knowing that I'm almost 50. You don't look it. So, to play a part as a community person, right? Someone that's sitting there with the church, with the grocery store, with the Rite Aid. And so this means a lot to me, especially since we're not only putting in the infrastructure for clean shared mobility, but because our city is changing into the community. So while I could talk for a really long time, I have some other things. I have some other things to say later. So on that, I will have a seat for me.
And just transparency, Keshia organization is the community-based organization that does the community engagement for our projects, all of them. So we have a very good working relationship. So that's why if you hear me tell her that that's enough. It's because I know her. So the other part is, and this is for Kim and Curtis, that's focused mainly on the planning part of this is, and we know that planning is a big piece of this puzzle. It sets the stage and foundation for the transformation to happen. One of the things I want to know is, can you all tell us how that looks? Where do you start in that process?
Sure. Where does planning start?
If you're from the beginning, take just as I know we don't have a lot of time, but how does that look for someone that's sitting at that table?
I'll start with very briefly with the academic answer, and then I'll get into both are real, but the real answer. But planning is a cycle, right? We should be continuously assessing conditions, realizing, whether you look at problems or assets. You mentioned deficits. Historically, we look at the problems and say, how do we design a solution to this problem? More and more, we're taking more of an assets-based approach and just mapping those and building from that. But both are valid. So assess your situation, plan, design the solutions. Hopefully, I think there'd be a few planners in the room. Those plans are implemented, which is not always the case, but let's say that plan is implemented, then you want to monitor and evaluate that, and the cycle continues. On the ground, so that's the planning theory, and sometimes it plays out that way, sometimes it doesn't. I think one area that most of my projects get started is, it is with a problem. This road is crumbling. There's too much congestion in this area. There's not enough activity in our downtown area where we have a train station. And usually like a catalyst to get the initial stakeholders together, and I'm drawing on my experience from here in the Chicago South suburbs, is a grant or a funding opportunity. That can be a spark to just start to get the pieces together.
Thank you.
In terms of starting with planning, I think for us, how we've been looking at planning all sorts of issues, so I guess I should say, I work for like a county government, and we don't have all the powers of a normal government, and we only have 3. We have the power to tax, the power to plan for land use, and then the other requirement is to provide for education. But building roads, police force, health services, none of those other services are part of what our local government does, though it's an elected opportunity, so we'd have to go to the voters to ask for it. So it's ironic, I think, that the government that I work for has been around, not for a very long time, 65 years, And the fact that planning for land use is one of the 3 primary things that we have to do, there is very little value in planning among the elected officials and leadership. So though the department that I work for has been planning for a long time, our community really prefers to let just development happen anywhere and think we can grow our way out of some of the community problems that we have. So one of the things we started to do related to planning and addressing issues and looking at problems and trying to figure out how we're going to meet these community needs is kind of start with implementation first in terms of our strategy as planners, to then engage the community. Okay, this is the problem. There are solutions out there, and the community is going to help us understand some other ways that we might be thinking about things, but how are we going to get our electeds and our policymakers and our administration to say, yeah, let's do that, let's implement that. And so we have started, when we form a stakeholder group, looking at whatever issue we might be working on, I always ask the mayor to appoint one of our assembly members to be on the stakeholder group, so they are learning about the issue, they're talking about those that are affected from within the conversation, and so then they can advocate to their peers about why maybe we want to do this thing. And I think it's a better process and one that we haven't done in the past. The other thing we're doing related to implementation is adding a complete chapter on implementation in all of our plans, so that we pass the plan, it gets adopted into code, and then the very next meeting we're coming forward with a resolution saying, let's do step 1 of this plan that you just passed to start achieving those goals.
That's perfect. So one of the word that stuck out for me the most is you said partnerships. So I know for us that's been critical in moving our projects along. And so, Keshia, we know that just because of the work we've been doing, that community engagement is at the heart of all these projects that we're talking about. So just kind of, you can talk about how does community engagement look like for you and your community?
Funny enough, for our community, what happens is people put stuff in and they tell you, oh, we just did this because people said you needed it. Well, wait, first of all, who is people and do they live here? And so while there's been a repetitive turning wheel for people doing that in the lower areas of a city, this is different because we actually went, I and some of my people, we actually went into the community and we were like, you know what, let's find some partners that can help us spread the word. And then I don't believe in buy-in, I believe in ownership. Because if I buy something, I can sell it. If I own it, it's mine. So I asked, can we find some people that can have ownership over what we need to do in this city, because we're getting ready to be left behind in another era. We live in Southwest Fresno. We're in California. And Southwest Fresno is left behind. Our schools are not as good as the others on the other side of town. And so this was a way to get that ownership from our pastors, from our community members, from whoever, to become a part of this walk. And now they believe in it and they can't wait for it. So the planning part was the most important part, and just having those people be the face was even more of an important part, because people know them and they know me. So that was the planning process.
And also, I can add is that part of the planning was we had a lot of stakeholders, and we brought, like the city of Fresno, we brought a lot of the politicians, the council members were at the big part of the planning, and so we had to get that buy-in. And now that we're in midterms, and so there's a lot of publicity around infrastructure dollars, and when we opened our mobility hub, we got a lot of press, so so I'm using it. So I'm using that to kind of get them to stay engaged in regards to, well, you need to pass this, you need to do this. So having those people engaged in the planning stages is really essential for these projects to move along. Also, I want to ask both of you, all of you actually, but I'll start with Curtis. What are some of the best practices in regards to planning?
Another big one. Okay, so I'll try to be less academic with this one. So here's some terms that we probably heard a lot of yesterday in our day-to-day jobs: equity, resilience, community-driven plans, implementation-focused plans, and these are words that I use a lot as well. And I'm mentioning this because sometimes you say, oh, that's a buzzword. Mm-hmm. But really, it's maybe it is at a point, and I guess in the case of resilience, I remember that really popped up in 2015 after, I think it's Hurricane Sandy. There's a lot of funding. HUD had their National Disaster Resilience Competition. It became a buzzword and a funding program and a political initiative. But really behind that buzzword was real good planning. Like, it makes sense to prepare communities to adapt to change. It makes sense to not just placate or inform communities, but bring them along so that they can have ownership, and build equity. So the question, what are the best practices? I think it all comes down to showing up, doing good work, and using those frameworks. And I guess part of it is your intention and what you bring to it, but being consistent. And doing that over time will build trust and a long-term relationship. And then we could create a plan or design a project, but it's going to take that relationship to really move things forward. I can't speak for many other states, but in Chicago and Illinois, it does take quite a while to get projects from a concept to being built. I think that's what I would say in terms of the best practices.
Thank you.
Sure. I guess building off one of the things that you said, Curtis, about building that community trust, I think that is a key for our little division right now as well. And, we've done a fair job, engaging the community. We have 16 distinct communities within our region. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but we're the size of West Virginia, so we're really spread out. And so we've done a fair job engaging each of the community councils related to some of the plans that we've done. But back to implementation, we didn't do anything with the plan. We spent months and sometimes years talking with the community and getting their opinions and asking for their buy-in, and then we put the plan on the shelf and said, whoop, we did it, we planned it, and that was it. So one of the projects we're working on right now, for those of you who work for local government, maybe you have these capital improvement programs. We spend all this time soliciting information from communities to write down their community infrastructure needs, and then theoretically use that as a budgeting tool to then invest in those infrastructure projects that the community said they wanted. We just planned every year. We made a list of 400 projects, and I was like, oh, thank goodness we planned that and put it on. I'm like, so I came on board. I'm like, well, shouldn't we do those projects? Like, they're like the community said they wanted them. So we revamped the plan. We asked for, created some new guidelines to make sure the projects that people brought forward were within the powers of our local government to use taxpayer dollars to build and fund. And we're in the first year of that cycle right now. So we're educating the communities about what they can nominate. And then we're going to force our manager, he doesn't want to, but to present to the Planning Commission and the Assembly the projects that ranked the highest, and then ask for them to be included in the budget next year. So I think that follow through is really important as a government official, like to engage the community, get all those, good information about what community needs, and then go do it. So yeah,
Thank you.
I would say that is a best practice.
Just to play off that for a second, you mentioned sometimes you start with implementation, and how do you start with it? Because there's times when that can be bad, especially if you jump to engineering before you do a plan. Mm-hmm. We could design and implement the wrong solution, or the right solution to the wrong problem. But I don't know if it's the funding or the political climate, but oftentimes that is the start. Like, we just need a win, and we just need to move. And again, that can be an appropriate trigger for a planning process. I think it's our role as planners to take what might be on a political time frame or for a political win and turn that into an actual a project that's aligned with your regional strategy. So I think starting with implementation or jumping to the end a little bit, it might say, oh, that's a little backwards, but no, that could actually be an appropriate trigger for a planning effort.
Exactly. I think I told another group is I'm one for writing an amendment. Like, this is not aligned with where we're at. This is not aligned where the community is. I need to amend that, change the date, and people are like, oh, but it takes time. I don't care. I'm amending it. Same thing with budgets. I feel like those are living documents, and sometimes we get stuck with that. Task one needs to be done by, well, it's not done, and we need to amend that. A good friend of mine, says that the people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution and furthest from the resources. And I see that over and over again. I was so happy when I learned that as an adult, because I grew up in East Palo Alto in the ghetto, where infrastructure was not a major part of the plan. And now that tech has moved in there and it's been gentrified, well, there's infrastructure everywhere. So it starts with planning and the implementation and accountability, and that's where we hold our community partners true to holding us accountable with that, and then doing that, Keshia, I just wanted to talk about when we talk about partnerships and your role in your agency role in the projects. What are your best practices?
So I'll walk there. So there's a few things. So I'm gonna engage you guys just a little bit. So how many people like Starbucks? Almost more than half of the room, right? Why do you like Starbucks? Oh, thank you. So while we have, I not only engage the adults, because guess what? In 15 years, the adults will be in the little homes for, if we can afford it. We'll be in the homes for people who can just go and eat and roll up to their room and then come back down when they want to see other people. So I engage the students. And I engage the housing authorities. I engage the mayor. I engage, my community partners, my pastors. I keep talking about my pastors because they are really the driven guides to a lot of things that happen in our community. We don't have those kind of pastors in Fresno that kind of sit on the sidelines. No, they're chanting and yelling about the things that we need. So while I engage the kids, one of the projects that I did with the housing authorities is we had kids in our community develop what do they think their city needed to look like. What does your community need to look like? These kids did projects with bowling alleys and Starbucks and boba, and I'm thinking they're saying we just want what everybody. We want a Walmart. We like Costco, right? So with this, I also engage the kids. We engage the kids because my partner right here, she firmly believes in training kids to jobs. We're going to train them to learn how to work on these vehicles. We're going to create a pipeline where kids are not, just messing off during the summer. We're going to create a pipeline where they're learning how to work on the electric cars and bicycles, and we'll train them, and then they can go out and become entrepreneurs. That's where she is. And that's where my engagement really is within the community. Can somebody tell me what is like a really important part of people bringing things into your community? What is the most important part? Somebody just raise your hand or yell it at me. What's the most important part? When I say I'm going to bring a gas station to a community, what's the most important part about that?
About bringing a gas station?
Yeah. Convenient to use. Thank you. What about a liquor store? Yes, sir.
Good hours.
Thank you.
Not necessarily.
No. Post-COVID, that's a great answer. But post-COVID, that's a great answer. We all need a liquor store, right? But on the other end, what if there's 5 in the same neighborhood?
There could be grocery stores instead.
Well, we didn't have a grocery store until the last 10 years in my neighborhood. Thank you for that. We didn't have a grocery store in my neighborhood until the past 10 years. We went without a grocery store. We had to drive the freeway to get to a grocery store. So these are the reasons why I engage students. These are the reasons why I engage the people who live there. And these are the reasons why I think that it's important to make sure that I integrate all those pieces. And the mayor gets to go to the project function with the students, and he gets to see what they really need. Because now, guess what? They will develop that into a plan and make it won't be everything, but at least the kids might get a boba shop, or they might get a Starbucks, or they might get a bowling alley, and maybe not a Costco, but maybe a Winco. But things are evolving. So that is my short answer.
Well, thank you for that, Keshia. Well, I just wanted to take a minute to see if there's any questions that y'all may have, comments.